Hi, and welcome to the Career Stories podcast. My name is Joe, and I'm with my colleague here, Carrie. So we are careers advisors for Skills Development Scotland, and we are quite excited to bring this very first episode of our new podcast, where we're going to be talking to career professionals in different roles, find out what they do for their jobs, what their background is, how did they get there, and then also what their future ambitions are.
Yeah. So our goal in this podcast is kind of to inspire people so they can hear from real life people who are doing these real life jobs that they've maybe not known about, and to consider the wide range of careers that are available in the world of work and maybe jobs that they've had no idea even exist before.
Yeah, now it is our first time. Now I've done a podcast before, but this is I'm not going to lie, I talk all the time, but it's the first time that we've done a kind of host podcast. So we need to be with us. We're probably a little bit nervous, but somewhat still very excited by the concept. I'm delighted to introduce the lovely Laura Young, who is an environmental scientist, activist, social media influencer, which is awesome. But you're also known as Less Waste Laura on your socials, is that correct?
That is correct. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Oh, thank you.
Come in. So Laura's a young Scot who has made our mission to educate people on how we can take better care of our planet, using the power of social media, and particularly I think Instagram. And you've got over 43,000 followers there. Well done. I can't even imagine. I don't know that many people. I don't know how that you would do that. So that's fantastic. You've also got 36,000 on TikTok as well, and you have racked up millions of views, so that's amazing.
Congrats. Yes, you also highlight everything from the damage being done by the disposable vapes, and the continued reliance on fossil fuels. You talk about the facts that people need to know about helping the environment, things that probably we seem to just ignore in our day-to-day stuff, which is great. Through your dedication and education, you've been able to not just influence your followers online, but also decisions and policymakers who can make a difference when it comes to changes in society. So that's awesome. As careers advisors, right, how would you explain to a young person or anybody else what it is that you do from your own words, I guess?
I mean, it's a great question. And you've maybe started your whole podcast series with someone with a bit of an unusual way of working. If someone was to say in a snapshot, what do you do? I would say I'm an environmental scientist, I'm a campaigner, and I'm a social media influencer. And you even said that in the introduction, because that kind of encapsulates everything that I do. But I would say I've got something that's like a portfolio career, is the fancy way, but really it's just a wee bit of this and a wee bit of that. So I work on lots of different projects all at once. So with my scientist hat on, I do research looking at climate change, and I do that looking here in Scotland and in the UK, and I look at issues like flooding and drought and impacts like coastal erosion, you know, things that are happening here in Scotland, and I look at how we can all become more resilient to climate change and how we can do that with people involved. But I'm also a campaigner, so I like to look at the problems in the world, especially to do with climate change and the environment, and I try and think, how can we change that? Like, how can we not just let the planet, you know, have climate change impacts, or how can we not just pollute the world with plastic or whatever it might be? How can we change that? So I do a lot of campaigning, trying to raise awareness for what we can all do, what businesses can do, and importantly, what the government can do. And over the last few years, the big campaign I've been involved in is around disposable vapes, which are very harmful to the environment and public health. And then the third thing is social media, right? I mean, we all, I think all use social media, whether that's just for ourselves, you know, scrolling for friends and family, or we might use it school, college, university work. So I do a lot of stuff on social media. I talk about my work there. I use it as a platform to raise awareness, and I communicate. I'm a science communicator. I like to talk about my research and my campaigning there. And actually, it didn't start as a job. It started as a New Year's resolution to try and be more sustainable, and just kind of talked about my journey. But obviously it's grown to, thousands of people, millions of views, but really it's been a place now where I get to do work, which is quite exciting.
Sounds
awesome.
Amazing.
And your education wise, so what's your education? What have you achieved, I guess, in education so far?
Yeah, so when I was at school, this gives away my age, I did intermediate twos, I then did hires, and I did one advanced hire, which was geography, because I absolutely loved it and had such a passion. So I stayed in school until the end of 6th year. And then I went to university. So I went to the University of Dundee, and I'm from Glasgow. So that was me moving away from home for the first time. And I did geography and environmental science, and I loved it. And that's a 4-year course. And at the end of it, I surprised myself because I really didn't think I was academic. I didn't think I wanted to do any more studying, but I ended up doing something called a master's, which is where after university, you go and do 1 extra year typically. And I did that at the University of Edinburgh. So far I've done what you would call an undergraduate degree and then a master's degree. I then went and worked for a bit. And of course I'm now back as a scientist, again, surprising myself doing something called a PhD, which is again, just more research. And I'm back in Dundee doing that as well. So that's the kind of qualifications that I've had. But I would say I surprised myself because I never thought I would be an academic or do research. But I think when you find what you love, it actually becomes quite easy because you enjoy what you're studying.
Definitely. And I think that's something that people don't realise. I think a lot of people can feel like maybe university isn't for them, maybe college, maybe learning isn't, or because the subjects they've done in school haven't had that passion that maybe you can find when you're studying something a bit more specific, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when did you feel like you first felt that passion for environmental protection, green issues? Where did that come?
It's a great question. So I would say actually looking back to school was when I first was trying to think, what do I want to do as a job with my life? And my family, I guess, is the first place you look to for inspiration. My mum works as a GP. My dad works with spreadsheets and numbers. That was very boring, so I knew I didn't want to do that. And my brother was going down the engineering route. And so I thought, I don't really know if those 3 things are what I want, which left me to try and think for myself about what I wanted to do. And when I was at high school, I wasn't really into studying and academics. You know, I definitely did well. You know, I didn't struggle too much, but I struggled to find what was going to be my passion until I took the subject geography. And I just loved learning about the world, learning about nature. And you know, we live in Scotland, one of the most beautiful countries, but also the most interesting in terms of the geology, the formations, the rivers, the mountains, the coastal areas. And one of my favourite things was if you were ever driving, you know, on a holiday in Scotland and you would drive past something and you'd go, I know how that was formed. Like I learned that in geography. So I absolutely loved that. But also when I was at school, I did something called the Duke of Edinburgh. And that is an opportunity for you to do volunteering, to upskill yourself, you know, to really get trained in the outdoors. But you also get a chance to go out. You get to go hiking and camping, and it's a bit of a laugh. It's quite fun, sometimes traumatic if there's midges and rain. But I absolutely loved doing the Duke of Edinburgh at school. And I think those 2 things combined while I was at school that I thought, this is what I want to do. I'm not sure what it is, but I want to do something that involves protecting the planet, you know, looking after this amazing natural space. And I would love my work to be based in Scotland because I'm so passionate about it. And I think just at school, it was that kind of bubbled away. And I probably chose to go to university because I knew I wanted to know more about this subject, geography. But I definitely went not knowing what my job would be. But I think, and I had some teachers that just said, you know, if you find what you're interested in and passionate about, you don't need to know exactly what the job is. And they said the thing of, and there's probably jobs out there that you've never heard of, I've never heard of, but they will be there. And so that was really what kind of pushed me to doing that and to going away to university. And I've really enjoyed discovering actually what the jobs are that you can do with those passions.
I think it's good to hear because as careers advisors, one of the subjects that comes up that people love but don't necessarily understand the opportunities that fall in them is geography, probably right up there.
Yeah.
So to hear that you have followed what you enjoy, took it to university and then discovered through your learning where that could take you.
Yeah.
And obviously sometimes that you might not stay in that, you know, some people don't necessarily, but you have, and obviously now, you know, reaping the rewards because you're doing really well, obviously. And what made you transition into the aspect of social media and finding out how important that was for your own journey, but also for you to get your voice out there in terms of what you're campaigning?
Yeah, so for me, the social media, it kind of happened by accident. So 2018, so I feel like that's nearly 10 years ago, which is kind of crazy. But in 2018, I was finishing up university. So I was in my final year. And around that time, there was Blue Planet on the TV. So the David Attenborough documentary about the ocean and especially looking at things like plastic. And I feel at that time, everyone was so aware of the impact of plastic pollution, litter, the environment. And I was at the end of university. So this all felt really relevant to me. But on the 1st of January, 2018, we were coming into a new year and I was away with friends and family. And one of the things that I was thinking about was the year ahead. I knew that I was finishing university. I was going to have to find a job, which is quite a scary prospect for some. So I wasn't really sure what 2018 had in store for me. And on this January 1st walk with friends and family, I was trying to think of some sort of challenge or New Year's resolution to like carry me through this big year that was going to have a lot of change. And as we were on this lovely beach walk in a place called Ely, which is on the East Coast near St Andrews, there was so much plastic litter, just rubbish on the beach. And there was us sort of having this philosophical, like, oh, what's 2018 going to have in store for us? What could our big challenge be? And there was just rubbish everywhere. And so it was on that day that I thought, well, maybe that could be my own personal challenge for 2018 is a New Year's resolution to try and be more sustainable, right? I wasn't really sure what that would look like, but I thought I could try and reduce my waste. I could try and be a bit more sustainable, buy more secondhand clothes, try and not use my car as much. Anyway, I started this challenge. Very quickly into the month of January, I realised so many people were interested. Could people talk about what they're up to that year? And loads of people were saying, oh, wow, I really would love to be a bit more sustainable too. I feel quite embarrassed about how much I buy or how much I waste. And so I realised I should probably write down this journey because people are interested. And so I decided to make an Instagram account and I called it Less Waste Laura, partly because I didn't want to bother all my friends and family in real life with eco-friendly things if they didn't want to see it. So I started this little Instagram and I just started to document what I was up to. Partly it was like, here's a bamboo toothbrush or here's a bar of shampoo. Like, here's why this is more sustainable. Here's where I found it. Here's where I got it. But slowly I started to move beyond just like tips and tricks and actually started to go, well, here are some of the big issues that we're facing. Here's a bit of the background. Here's the science behind it as well, because I had the privilege of studying that at university. So we're sharing that. And really quickly it snowballed into a big platform talking about big issues, but also trying to encourage people to think what they could do, what businesses could do. And of course it sort of, I was going to say spiraled, and that sounds quite negative, but actually it's sort of spiraled in a good way into a platform to campaign, to actually say, let's not just talk about these things and try and change our own lifestyle, but let's actually push, whether it's the government or businesses, to do more. And that is honestly where it all came from. And of course, that has now turned into a job. You know, I get paid for some of that as well, which is really nice. And I get to work with amazing organisations, charities, businesses. And so that's been quite an exciting job that actually just came out of a New Year's resolution, not really sure what would happen. And now it is a huge part of the work that I do.
Oh, I love that. It's one of those ones with, there's so many people, they feel like they have to have this exact plan of their whole future ahead of them. And if they don't, they worry, especially if they've got friends. I don't know if you'll find it's the same. They'll have friends who know exactly what they're going to do. And they're sitting going, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. And it can feel quite scary. So to kind of show a New Year's resolution based on a walk on the beach has led to what's happening for you just now. That's amazing. And I think it just shows like all that sort of planned happenstance. These things just happen and it can be quite exciting. And that's, you can't plan all the best things, can you?
Yeah. And I would say, you know, I remember when I was at school and leaving school, a lot of my friends had quite vocational jobs in mind, you know, so they wanted to become a teacher, a doctor, an engineer, or they went to college to do something like plumbing or joinery. And they had it was like a ladder. You know exactly once you start on that route, you know exactly where you're going, you know the steps involved, or maybe even the companies that you apply for have ladders that you just climb. And I think for me, that's definitely something I've had to let go of. I was quite anxious about what on earth am I doing? Where is the career progression? Or what are the steps I'm supposed to follow? Or even who are the people that I'm supposed to follow? But I think I've definitely let that go a lot and felt more relaxed in knowing that I might not know exactly what the next step is. But actually, sometimes you can carve that out for yourself. You know, I've carved out a job in social media, in campaigning, and everybody can try that. It might not always work out, but actually even giving it a go, you can learn so much useful, transferable skills that you can take elsewhere as well.
Yeah, definitely. If it's not too cheeky of a question, what are you working on just now? What can you tell us about?
Yeah, I mean, lots of different projects. Like I said at the beginning, a portfolio, career, wee bit of this, wee bit of that. So my research is always ongoing. And so that is a big chunk of the work that I do. And a PhD is something that has a start and a finish. So I will be finishing that. I am going to finish it in October 2026, definitely. So that's always kind of bumbling along in the background, which is really exciting. The campaigning is always ongoing, but on the 1st of June this year, we had the ban on disposable vapes. And that was really the conclusion of a huge campaign that ran for over 2.5 years, actually. So now I'm looking at what are the next things. And my email inbox is always filled with people's ideas for new campaigns. So there's always things that I'm looking at thinking, how can we do a bit more of that? I love podcasting too. And so I actually did a climate science podcast at the beginning of 2025. And it was a really amazing opportunity for scientists to get behind these microphones and actually talk about their science. And so one of the things I'm quite passionate about is encouraging other scientists to do the same. Not all scientists are comfortable talking about their science on social media, on podcasts, even just on the radio, on TV. So that's something that I'm wanting to continue. And I've got a couple of different projects in the pipeline for this year to continue getting scientists to do that. And of course, there's just exciting collaborations, whether that's with Scottish businesses or different organisations. So I get to sit on a lot of boards and work with different organisations, which is really exciting. So Cycling UK have a Scotland Advisory Committee that I get to sit on. So I love to encourage people along that. I'm on the board of Circular Community Scotland, who are a sort of network for all the great organisations that do things like bike repairs or repair cafes where you can take your old tech and get it all fixed up, or even things to do with like charity shops. So I love to get involved in these sorts of projects as well, which are really small and community based, but actually have a huge impact to people locally, which is fantastic.
Do you find time to eat and sleep during this, or
never? And you know, this year I'm also getting married, so I'm planning a sustainable wedding. How did I forget that?
Wow, I mean,
that's bad. That's low on my to-do list.
That is incredible.
So that's a big thing. In September this year, I'm getting married, which has opened my eyes to the world of weddings.
Yep.
They are not sustainable. However, there is so much scope to make them. So if I was to have my time again, maybe this is what I will do as a job: a sustainable wedding advisor, organizer, planner, because there is so much amazing stuff out there to make a wedding sustainable. But I would say that is a gap in the market in terms of jobs, but also in terms of sustainability, people helping that industry. So that's a big thing I'm doing this year.
So going back to your socials and social media, I guess for young people it is becoming a more popular potential career opportunity. But I don't think maybe they get to see the kind of background of what it takes in terms of your time, but also, you know, equipment and just some of the pitfalls that might be there. So what do you face, I guess, doing your socials?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say there is actually jobs now. You know, people are full-time social media influencers or content creators, but also growingly, a lot of people have to use social media as part of their job. So even if they're not an influencer, it's still really good for us all to become a bit more confident in it. But, you know, it is actually quite difficult. I feel any time a social media influencer is like, oh, my job is so hard, everyone's like, all right, get a grip. But actually, it can be. I mean, so some of the awkwardness around it is, first and foremost, the thing I struggle with the most is I know that when I'm invited to something, whether that's an event or for a tour of a facility or to meet people, there is an expectation that I will produce something from that. And sometimes there's a bit of an awkwardness around, you're straight in the door and instantly you're like, right, I need to gather content. I need to be the person that pulls their phone out or their camera out and capture it. So sometimes you can feel awkward and you have to, kind of navigate that a little bit and make sure people know that you're trying not to be rude, but you need to disappear off and capture it. So part of it is that expectation that sometimes you can't quite enjoy what you're doing because you're also in the back of your mind thinking, right, I need to get photos of everything so that I make sure everybody's happy with what I get. But it is loads of fun as well. You know, it's fun to be able to make videos, create content and be able to share that, often with organisations that maybe don't use social media themselves or don't do it very well, and they would say that themselves. So it's nice to be able to kind of step in that gap. I would say I've had to upskill myself a lot. So our phones nowadays are amazing and, to be honest, can do the majority of what we need. But it is always great to learn a few skills in editing. So that might be video editing, photo editing, graphic design, just to give your content a little bit of a lift. But I know nowadays, like Instagram, TikTok, all these apps have stuff that is amazing built in. But that's definitely been helpful. And I think if I had my time again at school, I maybe would have done a photography course, or I would have done a course that was maybe a bit more about computer software, editing, videography, that sort of thing, because that would be very useful. I think it's also a little bit of a pressure because your life is very public, and that's something that, you know, stepping into. Sometimes that can be great because the campaigner in me says it's fantastic when you put something out and it goes to millions of people, and some of those people are influential people that can help get the government to make a policy change. But also you are going out to millions of people that are in the general public, and you are opening yourself up to the comments that they have. And so I would say have a really good team of people around you to support you if you are going to step into social media. I definitely have a great support network around me. So, I have really good boundaries for how much time I spend on social media. I've got the little timers even on, sometimes I do turn them off because I want to keep scrolling. But, I've got timers on how much time I actually spend on the apps myself. But I've also got a group of people around me who I can just chat to, who I won't feel embarrassed going to them and saying, actually, can I chat to you about something that happened online, and can have that back and forth. And, you've got barriers of protecting yourself, the things that you see online, and that's really important. And importantly, I've also got people that I am held accountable to. So I've got a little team of people who have my permission to get in touch with me when they maybe see something that I've posted that I've maybe been a bit too strongly worded, or maybe I've ranted a bit too much, even though that content does really well. But, so I think it's about having that support network around you. But I would say social media is here to stay. Hopefully we can make it better, because I know it can be a really dark place at times and it's got a lot of negativity, but I've seen the real positivity that it can bring and the influence it can have, and I think it's here to stay, and the more we can all upskill ourselves, the better. But certainly there's amazing apps nowadays that can help you learn skills in video editing and photo editing. But my main piece of advice for people, though, if they are thinking of stepping into social media, is find your niche, find your creative way of doing things. Don't try and copy what other people are doing. There will be a natural way for you to communicate, whether that is through videos and vlogs, or through cartoons and graphic design, or whatever it might be. And as soon as you find the thing that you're passionate about and the way that you like to communicate, that'll be when you see it flourish. And that would be my encouragement to people.
Perfect. I think that's really good advice for people, because I think a lot of the time, it might be similar for you, we're getting lots of people who are coming to speak to us who are talking about wanting to be influencers, but they're maybe not quite sure what they're wanting to influence. So I think it's so that even that advice of finding your niche, because everyone's got their unique additions that they can give out to the world, and it's that sounds really cheesy, doesn't it? I think it's about being able to put that out there in your own way, instead of, like you say, you don't want to just copy what other people are doing. You want to show yourself.
Yeah. I will add something. You maybe want to put this somewhere else, I don't know. Something else that I've had to navigate, which people might be interested in, and this is relevant to many different jobs, not just social media, but I've basically had to become a sole trader. I do work freelance. I've had to navigate what it means to send invoices, to know the rules around tax. I have to do a tax return. That sounds really, really boring and painful, and it is. But actually, just something to be aware of is that when you step into the world of whether that's becoming a social media influencer and content creator, where you might do paid partnerships, or whether you become a sole trader with plumbing or joinery or hairdressing, whatever it might be, you do step into a world where you have to look after your own income and taxes. So I would definitely recommend and it seems premature, but really day one, just understanding a bit of, how much can you earn before you have to pay tax? What are some of the thresholds? What's the process of doing that? Is it helpful to get people to support you with that? So I know that numbers and things are not my skill. So I actually got an accountant. It sounds really fancy, but actually I only really deal with them once a year when my tax return's due, but that was a good step for me. So just an encouragement that if people are stepping into the world of, nowadays as well, we know it as like a side hustle, right? Like loads of people have got a side hustle, whether it's like doing nails or making like art and selling it online, whatever it might be. Do just be aware of that, because I think that is a kind of scary thing if you don't get your head around it at first. But there's some amazing YouTube videos on it. The government have got some pretty boring but actually quite easy to follow step-by-step guides online. I'm sure, all different organisations have got things, but that is just a really logistical, like boring point, but it's super important. I wish someone had told me it earlier, and I would have even just simple things like got a good Excel spreadsheet template where I track things, all that kind of stuff, understand expenses. But certainly that's something I would give as a piece of advice for anyone stepping into freelance, sole trader, side hustle territory where you might be earning a bit of extra income.
It's good advice. Even the YouTube thing's good advice. I've used the YouTube thing even when it comes to careers, because kids go, I ask them about what do they know about that job, and they say, I know this, and it's such a minimal amount of knowledge. And I say, I guarantee if you YouTube it, someone's creating an animation of that job, and I've not been wrong yet. So like, I think it's a good, use that, the source of what is in entertainment, but also use it as a source for, you know, learning. And do you like, so when you go to the gym, right, and then you get to Saturday and you think, oh, cheat meal, right, I need a cheat meal, right? When it comes to you, environmental and being such a massive part, at what point do you let down your guard? Is there something you feel like you're totally okay with?
It's difficult, right? So I remember first of all, I travelled to America for work. So I got a flight, right? So as an environmental scientist, I'm not perfect. But I remember going, and the hotel I was in, I mean, it was shocking. And maybe it says more about America than this hotel in particular. But I came down for breakfast and everything was in single-use plastic. And this hotel was like a big chain. It was not, you know, and there was really no excuse for it. But I remember my fiancé was on this trip with me. And as soon as we came down for breakfast, he just looked at me and said, don't mention it. Don't let it ruin this trip. So sometimes I think you take a step back and you almost go, how much energy do I want to spend, you know, doing this, and what conversations can I have? So sometimes you will catch me with a plastic bottle, with a takeaway coffee cup because you've forgotten it, or because it's inconvenient, or because often you're being polite as well. You know, often you don't want to be rude. But after I was on that trip to America, I took the time to email the management of the hotel to begin a conversation, to raise awareness for that. And quite often that is what I'll end up doing, is saying, at the time, I'm not going to make a huge fuss about this. However, afterwards, I can follow up and try and encourage it. And I know that there has been hotels that I've stayed in, cafes that I've gone to, that have actually fully changed packaging or things, not just because of me, I'm sure, but because multiple people get in touch with them. So definitely not perfect, but I would say it's about encouraging the schemes that are happening. And actually we are beginning to see change, because individually we can do a lot, right? We can remember a water bottle, a coffee cup. I've always got a set of cutlery in my bag. You know, we can remember things that help us day to day, but we do need system change. And that's when the sort of campaigning comes in. And one of the things I've loved seeing in Glasgow actually is the Borrow Cup scheme. I don't know if you've come across this. Here we go. You can go and have a look when you go back into Glasgow. So there's over 50 cafes in the city centre of Glasgow that have now started a Borrow Cup scheme. And it means that when you go, if we forget your reusable cup, which many of us do, they actually have reusable cups available at the counter. You pay £1 extra. You can then go away, get your takeaway coffee, enjoy it. You can then take it to any of the drop-off points and you just scan the wee QR codes and you get your £1 back. And it's an amazing way that they are actually encouraging people to not get a takeaway coffee that's literally used once and then thrown away, but they are reusing these reusable cups. And I actually did a video about this when I was in Glasgow, because I turned up, didn't have my cup, was desperate for a coffee. We don't always need one, but that day I did. And I ended up getting one. I took a video, went viral online. And actually today, after we record this podcast, I'm off to the behind the scenes factory to actually see how they wash and clean and return them, which is really exciting. But sometimes that's exciting, is to know that we might not be perfect, but there are schemes beginning to happen, but we obviously need to support them, right? Because if nobody supports it. So next time you're walking around Glasgow, you can pop into some of the cafes that have it and support it and get one of these reusable cups.
What about, like, see, obviously as careers advisors, right? And you touched on it a lot about your education and your journey and to figuring out what you want to do. But if you had to go into a school, back to your school, sit in front of assembly, talk about your experience.
I've done that and it's
petrifying.
Really?
What kind of advice did you give them, like, in terms of your journey and maybe expectations or things to, like, kind of look out for?
Yeah. And I have actually gone back to my school, which was a really fun experience, actually. I guess one thing that I get a lot, I do things like this podcast. I go on the radio, I go on the TV, and I give talks quite a lot. And that is something that a lot of people are interested in, because regardless of your job, you might have to, at some point, give a presentation to your team, maybe give a talk to a group, go to a conference, or even just your team social media, your work social media team might ask you to do a video. And so I think speaking, confidence, public speaking is something that everybody could benefit from. So obviously I've got very specific advice for people if they want to be an environmental scientist or work in that sphere. But sometimes I think, well, how could I help everybody a wee bit more? And I would say confidence and communication are two skills that literally regardless of what job you do, are so useful. And I would say there's a few things that really helped me growing up gain confidence, because nobody wakes up and goes, do you know what I want to do today? A public talk. Absolutely not. And I get really nervous still to this day. And I would say I've had to build up my confidence and my skills and my communication. But there's definitely a few things that helped me. And I always encourage, especially kids who are at school or are in further education or in their first jobs, to try and do these things to gain that. I mean, the first thing I will say is growing up, I did dancing. And I did it from, I think, honestly, the age of 2 or 3 all the way up till I left to go to university. And I think having a sport, an outlet, you know, exercising is obviously fantastic for your health. But also I was flung onto a stage in a leotard, probably at the years that you're most vulnerable and self-conscious. Yeah. But actually it made me gain a bit of confidence. I was with some amazing girls and a few guys and just gained a bit of confidence in stage presence and like enjoying dancing. But actually that for me was quite important, was from, you know, in my teens, actually doing something that was pushing me out of my comfort zone, but actually helped me build up that confidence. I'm also a Christian and I grew up in a church, and quite often you were flung up onto the stage to read a Bible verse with lots of words that are very confusing and complicated. But actually reading out loud in front of a group is something that is incredibly helpful. So whether that is in a setting like a church, or if you can do a book group, or even if you can find a way of reading out loud in front of people, that is incredibly helpful. So whatever setting that might be. And then the third thing, this was when I was older and I was at university. I had a part-time job. So I worked the whole way through university as a waitress. And it was an amazing skill to be able to go up to a table of strangers constantly throughout the day and going, hi there folks, how are you doing? My name's Laura. I'd like to be your server today. What can I get you to drink? And that confidence of being able to go up to a table of strangers and be able to chat to people was amazing. And so I think when I go back to schools and chat to younger people, I try and say to them, no matter what you do, confidence and communication is key. And here's some of the things that stand out in my life that helped me develop that skill. What could you do to try and build up that communication? It might be a part-time job. It might be some volunteering. It might be a sports club, a sports team, you know, taking on a role. And that would be some of my core advice, because, and don't get me wrong, studying and working hard is so important. Like, you do need to have a good foundation of knowledge and grades and subjects that you excel in. And I hope that people find those subjects. But often it's what's outside of school and learning as well that can actually make you that kind of well-rounded person that is so beneficial going into any job, whether that's a part-time job straight out of school or your perfect future career, your dream job, whatever that might be.
I think I don't know if you think the same. I've had people where I've had pupils that I've known before the summer holidays, and they've come in and they're very anxious or very worried or very not very confident in themselves. And then over the summer they've went and they've got a wee part-time job. And honestly, it's like completely different people coming in to see you, and they're coming in and you're like, oh my goodness, what's happened to you? And it's amazing to see. And it's the same with hobbies and interests, and being able to talk about that, whether that's a sport or a physical activity, or they do Dungeons and Dragons and they've been sitting and making campaigns and things like that, and then they come in and they can talk confidently about their interests, and that can then move over into being able to talk confidently about other things. So yeah, that's some amazing advice for people to have there. It's
been absolutely, honestly, lovely. And you would be like, if we were giving careers advice to someone and this was how they were, like, how easy would our jobs be?
Too easy.
Like, we didn't have to say anything, which is so unusual for us. Like, we always seem to be the real trying to get them to converse, but you've been brilliant. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Would you share your social media stuff for our listeners?
Of course. Yeah, anybody can find me at Less Waste Laura, and that's across all social medias. And I'm always sharing a bit about my journey, but of course I'm always happy to give people advice on communication and talking, but also on environmental science if anyone is ever interested in a career looking after this beautiful planet that we have.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much. That is us in our first episode.
I know. Well done.
Finished, which is really good. We are moving on to our next episode, where we will be meeting animal keeper, in Royal Zoologist Society of Scotland from the Royal Society. I'll say that. Should I try that again?
I don't know if we can do better.
I think we could definitely do better than that. But yeah, no, it's been absolutely, honestly, lovely. And you would be like, if we were giving careers advice to someone and this was how they were, like, how easy would our jobs be?
Too easy.
Like, we didn't have to say anything, which is so unusual for us. Like, we always seem to be the real trying to get them to converse, but you've been brilliant. I really appreciate it, so thank you so much.
Thank you.